All right. Hi, Aditya. Hello, everyone.
Hello, greetings from Museo Camera.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining this afternoon. Good morning, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Thank you for signing in. We're about to begin our chat with Aditya Arya, director of Museo Camera, um, one of the sort of stalwart names from the Indian photography scene. As a young photographer myself, I remember hearing his name in different places that I was doing commercial work. So it's great to be able to have this conversation with you today, Aditya. I wanted to kind of give a little bit context to how I met Aditya and my introduction to him. He's a name that one hears again and again in the world of photography, particularly if you're a analog photography enthusiast like myself. He's known for his propagation of analog, technologies, processes, and now, of course, with the Museo Camera, it's an incredible facility that we'll hear more about today. So the first time I met Aditya was here at the Delhi Photo Festival in 2015. Aditya was teaching a wet plate, actually alternative processes workshop with albumin and wet plate and all these different things. I was there with my project called the Photo Seva. So this was my introduction of Aditya through my large format camera, looking at Aditya with his large format cameras, teaching a workshop. And it was a sort of, we didn't really interact much or talk much, but I think there was a sort of meeting of minds. And in some way, there's an understanding when you see someone working, I guess, in this technology or lack thereof, that you understand that there's a fundamental sort of appreciation for the photographic form and the very medium itself, other than all the interests we hold from an artistic and conceptual and documentation point of view. So I'll just sort of wanted to show you that picture to give you context of how and when I met Aditya. To tell you a little bit more about Aditya, Aditya, of course, is a very well established, eminent commercial and travel photographer. Aditya began professional photography in 1980 after graduating in history from St. Stephen College, Delhi University. After a brief stint in the Mumbai film industry, where he did stills for some of the leading directors, he moved back to Delhi. In addition to his wide-ranging commercial and travel portfolio, his work has been published widely in books and travel magazines around the world. He is known for his expertise in the field of advertising and corporate photography, specializing in products, interiors, and food. And Aditya will introduce himself with images in a few minutes when I hand over. He's also played a pivotal role in the establishment of the India Photo Archive Foundation and the Neil Dongre Awards and grants for excellence in photography. Aditya has also turned alchemist and artist, practicing and teaching the art of vintage photographic processes such as salt prints, egg albumin prints, gum bichromate, and of course, wet plate photography. I want Aditya to sort of show us a little bit about himself through his work, his early days, and then we will segue into the Kulwant Roy archives that I'm sure many of you here signed up to look at. And from there, we will segue into the Museo Camera, the why, and then, of course, a little bit about the making of the museum, and we'll get a walkthrough live from Aditya. Aditya, over to you. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you, Varun, Suchi, and team CPB for organizing this show. And congratulations for many things which you guys have been doing in Chennai. Absolutely fantastic. So, to introduce everyone, really apologies for all this little technology issues, but I come from the analog times and I love the feel of the film. And this is what I did for 40 years. I shot ads and I traveled all over the country. I traveled extensively shooting ads and industrial areas, mines, and locations. One carried huge amount of lights, and I specialized in lighting up places and complicated situations. But things changed for me, and in 2008. Because of this gentleman called Kulwant Roy, who was a family friend, and he had learned photography from my great grand uncles in Lahore in way back in 20s and 30s. And he became a friend when I was very small, when I was in probably, I was probably 10-year old. He started visiting home, and he used to hang around a lot and show me his cameras. And um, I, he gave up photography sometime in 70s, and eventually he passed away in 84. But he didn't have a family, and when he passed away in 84, he left his entire archive with me, which was thousands of negatives and many boxes. And so I was busy traveling. I didn't have time to really open his archive and to see what is inside those boxes. I knew they were very important. I had seen Gandhi and Jinnah and things and all, but where was the time? And 2008, I kind of said, okay, let me open these boxes. My mother used to hassle me a lot and say, yeah, you know, what is this? You've been lugging these trunks all over for last 25 years. And this is what happened when I opened those boxes in my guest room. The guest room was totally, this is just some of those boxes. There were images, negatives, prints, uh, there were hundreds kinds of, there was contact sheets going back to 1930s. So I spent 6 months sorting his stuff out, and then I realized this was not going to end. This, and I had to literally stop my advertising work and get down to looking into his negatives, prints, and sorting them out according to the years and subject. And I set up my Aditya Arya archive and started chronicling the story of this gentleman. This is what the boxes look like. Each box had a huge amount of negatives, prints all cramped into them. He was capturing images, selling images, uh, typically one-off images, meaning he did not have a roll film till 50s. He was shooting on sheet film. So each shot was an individual image.
Aditya, something you missed and which we discussed earlier was how you and your family connection to Kulwant Roy. I think that context also helps because it takes great trust for someone to just give you their archives of their life's work. And so where and how did that come about?
So this gentleman had learned photography from my great grand uncles in Lahore in 20s and 30s. But I mean, I never met those uncles of mine. I was not even remotely ever introduced to them, or I just heard that uh, they had a very unique practice. They were actually the pioneers of photojournalism in the country, and they established something called Gopal Chatrapati, which was, besides being a studio, was also specializing in shooting journalistic work, following Gandhiji and the leaders in Lahore, and selling those images to publications like Tribune. Tribune was a very well-known publication of those days, and these three brothers, and Kulwant Roy was their friend, was selling their images, and Kulwant Roy and the three brothers, just before the partition, parted ways, and they all drifted in different directions. One brother remained in Lahore, one brother pushed off to Mumbai to create another studio there. Kulwant Roy joined Air Force and he became an aerial photographer. he used to tell me his stories of days in the Air Force. As he used to tell me, we were treated like third grade officers. He said, we had a problem, and we were never allowed to use the swimming pool for from Monday till Saturday, and we were only allowed to use. He was posted in Quetta, by the way. Only on Sunday, because they used to change the water on Monday. So he had issues, and these issues led to his being court-martialed, and he was thrown out of the Air Force. And this is also around the time when the naval mutiny took place in Mumbai. So there was this discontent, and he was a very, very he was very hot-headed. Uh, and he left Air Force, and he was actually court-martialed and thrown out. And he traveling with the political leaders, shooting images and selling it to the newspapers, um, covering meetings. So this is my connection with him, and my family knew him, and my family shifted to Delhi post I mean, actually my mother's family shifted a little before partition, and in 60s he somehow ran into my family again, uh, and he was running his photography service called Associated Press Photos, his own independent um, venture from very close to Delhi University, from Morigate. Morigate was the Fleet Street of those days. That's where all the newspapers were published from. All the editors were based there. So again, the condition of his boxes, and so this is how I found these negatives. If you read the boxes, they'll say uh, Muslim League, Crips Mission, Muslim League daily session. So he had access to both the Congress meetings and Muslim League meetings. And I started actually looking into his negatives as a historian. See, I'm a student of history, and for me, there was another story which was embedded in this: is how was a photographer actually documenting these images? And so, some more images. It's amazing. He was, he was so particular about copyright and acknowledgement. I found a couple of these envelopes in his collection, which, if you see, it says Nehru's copied once, copyright holder not known. For somebody in 40s and 50s to actually think about copyright and to be so careful. What was happening is amazing. There were just 4 or 5 photographers. They were all friends, and they used to typically go down to cover events and do stories. And sometimes one of them would be sick or not, or had some family issues. They would happily share their negatives. They'll say, "Oh, yeah, take this negative. You can send it to your publication and give me the negative back." Unlike today, I mean, today there are these boundaries, but you see this, what this envelope says. There's a very big story embedded in this, and this is his own handwriting. He annotated his photographs very carefully, and you'll see on the negatives and prints. These are contact prints. He's written the date, time, the event.
And so in these days, he was doing his own printing, right? It wasn't in a commercial lab.
Absolutely. He had his own setup. He had a fairly elaborate setup. He had 3-4 people working for him. And at this point, I would like to tell you that that in 1976, when I was finishing school, uh, I spent my summer in his lab washing his prints. And I used to get 20 rupees a day, which was big deal because it used to cost me 50 paisa to reach his place. The bus from my place used to cost 25 paisa one way. And I used to spend the day. I used to wash his prints, and and it was huge. I mean that, and I never realized the importance of it. That someday I'll be taking a photography, but all that actually had an impact on my later life.
And so those were the years that it was part of his Associated Press that he set up.
Yeah, the work was going down. In 70s, he had stopped working, and I'll tell you the story later on.
Okay.
He was diagnosed with cancer, and blood cancer actually, and he eventually passed away in 84. So he had cut down on his work. He used to just do a couple of assignments, and he had some magazines. He would send his pictures, and I saw that he never looked at his archive. All this was lying in stores and almaras, and which of course he gave them to me. Eventually, by early 80s, he started leaving everything with me and said, one day when you have time, look into this. Maybe you'll find some interesting images. His earliest body of work is here. 1938, Gandhiji's visit to Utmanzai, which was the native village of Khan Abdul Ghaffar Khan, the frontier Gandhi. And this amazing body of work. It's very sad. I sat on this archive for 25 years. I lost, I would say, 25-30% of this archive because these negatives deteriorated beyond the point of recovery. They had got stuck, and they had reticulated very badly. I'll show you these negatives, but I was able to retrieve a lot and do high-end scanning of many. So it's very important that today there is no body of work like this in entire country of one single photographer from those days who followed the freedom movement. 1938. I've not been able to locate any body of work. Yeah, Gandhiji with Khan Abdul Ghaffar Khan and Northwest Frontier 2, 1938.
I think it's interesting that you're presenting this ephemera as well, because I think it plays such an important role in placing the archive, because a photograph by itself can be read in so many ways, but just a simple piece of information scribbled on the envelope or the back can make it so much more valuable to a researcher, I think.
So there are many stories buried in it. It's the story of Indian photojournalism. This is the earliest body of work. This is the story of how these photographers actually worked. Now, these are some of the images inside. Gandhiji addressing the Khan Abdul Ghaffar Khan and his followers. Now, you see, these have been shot on medium format, not 4x5 inches, slightly less than that, and all sheet films. There was no second opportunity. You could only take one image.
Yeah.
And you know how difficult it is to operate these kind of cameras.
Yeah.
The perfection, the timing, the the pre-visualization which went into making these images. You see Gandhiji's assistant Pyare Lal lurking from behind Gandhiji, and Khan Abdul Ghaffar Khan offering that roti to Gandhiji.
Yeah.
Now, this is what happened to his negatives after 25 years. They had reticulated. That means the emulsion and the surface starts disintegrating, separating. And we had to assemble many of these on flatbed scanners. And many of them became powder by the time we finished scanning them because, um, it's deterioration because of
Absolutely.
time and storage. But these jigsaw puzzles were great fun in assembling.
I'm sure. And a lot of work.
Yes, you have to be passionate about history. You have to be very involved with work to be able to do this and see this amazing image, which which has Gulami written behind
Right.
Gandhiji and Sardar Patel and Nehru, and you can just guess. This is taken few months before independence. What are they discussing? Hey, we are going to be independent very soon. How are we going to manage this country?
Yeah.
Another. Sorry, you were saying something.
The timelessness of these images, and I think it's the simplicity of the framing. I think also because you're working in plate film, you don't want too many complicated environments. You try to simplify as a photographer and just, you know, go with the most simplest. I think the leading line to his head. I mean, the simplicity of the composition is incredible.
Yeah. I started looking at the newspapers. I tried to locate where was he selling these images, what was he doing with these images, and then I came across a lot of newspapers like this one, the Sunday Hindustan Standard. This newspaper doesn't exist today. This is July 1950. He got an award for this picture.
And so you mentioned when we spoke earlier that you had to, some of this archive was in your possession, but to contextualize the archive required you to travel not just within India but to
So I spent months sitting in Nehru Memorial Library going through the microfilms of various newspapers published in those days, trying to figure out the visuals and trying to match them with his archive, and trying to see, okay, oh, these, and somehow also trying to get the characters, because a lot of people could not be placed. Now you see that gentleman on the left hand side. Can you guess who is? He's Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose's younger brother, Sarat Chandra. Sarat ji actually joined Congress, and Netaji and Gandhiji did not get along, but Sarat remained faithful to Gandhiji. Um, Krebs mission. Here, the leaders are going to meet Sir Stafford Krebs. So, can you imagine creating these kind of images on a plate film? Perfect flow, the timing, the pre visualization.
yeah, incredible. And I mean, there's something you can see, you can almost see some power relations, etc., in the photograph themselves and the composition of it. There's a certain body language, and the composition places them as characters in some way of in as the photographer's mind of what the power and the politics were.
See the feet. See that little jhanda on the rickshaw. That little jhanda of that thinks the spirit of nationalism. See um, uh, Sardar Patel. So Sardar Patel wasn't feeling too well those days. He had a leg issue. he had something on his feet, and I believe he was normally not walking. He was always using the rickshaws, and he's looking at Nehru and Khan Abdul Ghaffar Khan and trying to wonder, hey, what's going on in their mind? What are they going to say in the meeting today?
Incredible.
Again, the condition of the boxes. Another interesting body of work is industrial work of his. Now you see, it's very difficult to compose in square format. Very few people are comfortable shooting in square. So he in 50s actually started working on Rolleiflex. He acquired a Rolleiflex and he started shooting various big projects. And this is the mother of all projects, Bhakra Nangal Dam,
Right.
which was what Nehru called the temples of modern India.
Right.
He attended all the meetings of Congress, and it's very interesting. I have these little notes from him, and these are lunch coupons being given by the Congress party way back in 50s to the journalist.
And this was all in the boxes that he had given you. This is like
Yes, absolutely.
amazing that he also kept some of these things, knowing potentially the value, but
He kept a lot because I opened these things after 25 years. I lost a lot, but I found images of his in magazines all over the world. Like this image, it's a black and white negative, but this is a hand painted image of Nehru. So since he did not have access to color film, color photography, he would take black and white pictures and hand paint them and then sell them to magazines all over the world.
and so he never shot any color throughout his career.
No, only after 60s when he traveled abroad.
Okay.
Again, Khan Abdul Ghaffar Khan and Gandhiji going on a walk. Now, the condition of his negatives and how badly reticulated they were. You know, there is this thing about which you mentioned and we talked about interpreting images. And this is also very interesting because here, my take on images is you have to also understand what was the photographer trying to do. Today, you have archivists, curators who create books and stories on images without knowing why was that photographer using or shooting a certain equipment. To me, it was sheer availability of the equipment at times. It was so difficult to get equipment and film those days. But people try and interpret and create stories. They write books on it. You know what I call Hindi mein man ghadant kahaniyan. You know, it's like figment of your imagination. You say, oh, he actually went there. No, the point is what was going on in the mind of the photographer, you don't even know. So don't try and give it words. Don't try and create stories out of it. You have to look at it from the point of view of photographer. For him, this was also an opportunity to create an image and so that he could sell it.
Yeah.
You see, as I say, there's another aspect of photography, which is rotography. I mean, people had to make a living. And why do these academicians actually forget that aspect? Why do they go and look at some studio pictures and they said, oh, what fantastic, this guy is using an aircraft and a bus and he's got these. No, that backdrop was the only backdrop available, and he thought, oh, my villagers would love to get themselves photographed against that backdrop because it's so fancy, it's so exotic. You know, he didn't have a choice.
No, I think, yeah, what the point you're making and what we've debated about is sort of, it's important to sort of almost as the researcher and historian to put yourself in the shoe of the practitioner, because often the practitioner is looking through his lens, through the lens of, like you say, making a living, of putting food on the table. And so the lens, his lens is directed to what pays the bills. And only 20, 30, 100 years later, are people able to go view that work in different contexts and dissect it? But often the context within which the work is created is very, very important to understand. I think there I'm totally with you, but I also see the academic position of recontextualizing images, because I mean, right now in the West particularly, people are bringing back the works of photographers who 70 years ago were simply working photographers, but today we can celebrate them for the artists that they were, but they were never acknowledged for. I think what's changed is now my generation, if I can say, is that we first start an Instagram page, Facebook profile, and start telling everybody what kind of artist we are, and then we do work, right? And it's almost like when looking backwards, they never talked about themselves as artists. They talked about themselves, like you call it, roti graphers. Like they put roti on their plate, you know, and I love that term. Thank you.
Yeah, it's absolutely, because I mean, it is also based on the idea of, okay, sheet film was very expensive and in short supply, so only one image was possible, and you know, like many of those shots, like here, Gandhiji listening to INA soldiers. This is when, after the surrender of INA, Gandhiji met the INA soldiers with all the Congress leaders. So you can see Sardar Patel, Maniben, and Nehruji is also standing in the background. And that is Captain Ram Singh playing his famous Kadam Kadam Badai Chale. So look at the frame. Look at the low angle. So it is, photographer has actually, look at this, look at the flow of the image in this. Obviously there's a very big crowd, but photographers tried to position himself so he can see Nehru, and he didn't want to cut down, and of course no zoom lens, nothing. I mean, you know, you have a sheet film camera and that's it. Here, another perfect. So all these images of his, the beauty of the images is these are negatives which have been scanned the way they have been shot. So there is no recomposing, there is no manipulation in the darkroom later on.
So you can see him, his eye as a storyteller, and I guess each composition is sort of very directed, where he wanted to tell a sort of story of relationships, power, and then also depth of belief. So I think that really comes through this, particularly this set of works that you're showing us.
So can I tell you the story of this INA? INA soldiers were actually tried for treason by the British. The INA trials were held in Red Fort, and Gandhiji is kind of looking down, okay? Because, and look at the soldiers, they're looking at him. Hey, answer us. Why? So the issue was, the British said INA soldiers waged a war against the crown. they cannot be pardoned. They have to be tried. They cannot be given the status of freedom fighters. And here, Gandhiji and the Congress party actually set up a, a, committee to fight the case. So all the lawyers were all the leaders of Congress who fought on behalf of INA. But here you look at the soldiers, they want Gandhiji to give an answer. What is happening? You can see and Gandhiji is looking down. He doesn't have an answer.
You have a beautiful anecdotal story about Gandhiji and how he would treat photographers. Maybe this is a good time to tell us that.
Here, another INA soldiers in their dresses receiving Gandhiji for the trials. Here's another interesting story of post-independence when Kulwant Roy went to attend all the swearing-ins of these Rajas and Maharajas at Patiala, where they actually took an oath of allegiance to India. And here is this Maharaja. So all the Kapurthala, Jind, Patiala, Malerkot, all the rulers had to actually go and speak to Patel. And Patel was a very calm cookie. You look at this. You look at the sun on the Maharaja's face, and you see the hand. You see how calm Sardar Patel is, he was the man who unified this country. He's so cool. He's saying, hey, nothing doing. You have no option.
Yeah, I think these are very, very rare images, Aditya, that maybe the world would not have seen had you not fished out this archive from this box, because I think we've all, as students of history in the Indian school system, learned about this moment of unification. And to see this happening through these pictures, I have goosebumps. It's incredible. And I think what you're saying about the body language and also the choice of, the square format and the way of composing that, and almost with the slight twist, giving that sense of power to Vallabhbhai Patel. I know these are things that I'm reading as a academician in some sense, but I see that happening. I see that he makes these choices as a photographer that captures the power dynamics, because a lot of this work was about power dynamics. And
yeah,
it's very wonderful to see the frame almost falling towards Vallabhbhai's side in one way. And intentional or not, it says something.
And you see the eye, he's like so calm, while you see the eye is looking in distant, hey, I don't see any future. Maharaja's future is very bleak.
And they're all negotiating their purses at this point. How much are the government going to give them for how many years?
He called them individually. Before the oath ceremony, each one had to meet him personally. I have that whole sequence with me. It's fantastic.
Fantastic.
So look at this. Another classic image from early 40s of Gandhiji stepping down from third class. And you see that man in the distant window. You see the composition. You see the leading line. You see how, and this is on sheet film. This is that perfection. This is that
anticipation. It's that.
This is pre-visualization, which I keep talking about. Third class was so important. Gandhiji said he traveled in third because there was no fourth class. Otherwise, he would have traveled in fourth class.
Right.
Again, one of those reticulated negatives. So here is an attempt to isolate an image. This is how the cutouts used to happen in the dark room. They would actually do a cutout using whites and take cut out the negative and then enlarge that area. So I have this negative, which is they've tried to do a cutout, but obviously it's got reticulated. So it talks a lot about the technology being used. This is one of the most iconic meetings on 6th of June, which led to the actual partition of the country. Lord Mountbatten on one side and Muslim League leaders on one side and Congress leaders on the other side. That's Kripalani, Sardar Patel, Nehru, Mountbatten. And you can see a little bit of Jinnah on this side. I have many frames of this from various sides. And those are two assistants of Mountbatten who actually helped in the planning of the June Declaration.
I mean, the map in the background, all of those incredible elements.
One of the most iconic images ever shot by Kulwant Roy of Jinnah and Gandhiji in argument, which was actually for till 2010 acknowledged as unknown photographer by Getty, and they were selling this image. I found the complete image, and on behalf of my archive, New York Times wrote to Getty, and because I had this gentleman on the left-hand side, which is Shaukat Ali, while they had only Gandhi and Jinnah, what they were selling. They wrote to Getty, and Getty got back to me, and they said, okay, what do you want? What do you, I said, I don't want anything. It should not be unknown photographer. It should be Kulwant Roy now. So after a few months, they actually changed it. Now they sell this image. They call it Kulwant Roy collection.
Yeah,
but you see,
this image is just moment of clicking, because it is a sheet film. You can imagine the anticipation and concentration it would take so that the two hands would almost lead to each other in the frame.
Yep.
There's a sense of power, there's a sense of defiance from Jinnah's body language that would have been momentary probably, but the photographer is able to snap that. And I mean, even down to the cigarette and the way it's shaped, and the ash being there, it's incredible. It tells you so much.
So actually, though I have done a book on this guy Kulwant Roy now, and his work has not been yet studied in great depth by academicians. You know why? Because there are so many layers to this work. It's about, I keep saying, what you're seeing in photograph is only one layer. The second layer is how it was made. Jinnah's last meeting before he left India, you can see on the extreme top hand corner, Sadi, that is Humayun Vairawala. You can see Kulwant Roy also sitting top right. And some friend of his had sent him this picture. I found this in his personal collection. So after this meeting, Jinnah took off for Pakistan, for Karachi. This was his last press conference. Another amazing image of Gandhiji. So here Gandhiji collecting money from everyone. So even from photographers, he used to tell them, आप लोग मेरी फोटो बेच के पैसे कमाएंगे तो मुझे एक आना जरूर देना है आपको, which used to go towards the freedom movement. And Kulwant Roy used to always narrate these stories to me when I was a kid at home. Whenever he used to come for dinner, he said, okay, I'll tell you about that day. This is what happened. And that gentleman in the white in the middle, you will be surprised, is Mr. Bajaj, senior Mr. Bajaj, great-grandfather of Mr. Bajaj, who was a very ardent Gandhian. And you see the hands, So, my gut feel is that lady was giving something and she wanted some change back. But Mr. Bajaj said, no, you leave the whole thing there now. So,
Yeah, these daily life moments that are so iconic because also the characters in play. But I mean, like you said, it's 1 second later than this. I mean, not to harp this idea of decisive moment too
but
much, because, but yeah, it is this. That moment defines it.
it's amazing how he shot. I've got three sheet films in the sequence when the lady approaches, and okay, here, this is one of the most important picture for a country. You can't even guess. This is an original negative which has got totally destroyed. This is the signing of the Indian Constitution. The government of India does not have a single negative. I have Kulwant Roy's this negative. He was among a couple of photographers who were present that day there, and this negative has got totally destroyed. But luckily for me, he had also, and for the country, because then the government of India asked me for a print, because till 2010, government of India didn't know how many copies of the constitution were signed. And after analyzing this picture, the government of India showed archives ki three copies were signed, one bound and two loose. So
Wow.
this is how he used to leave his lot of his negatives. So he's written signing the Constitution of Republic of India 24/150, Sardar Patel and others signing. This is the contact print which I found inside that envelope. So it's a very defining moment, and what a perfect picture.
Yeah, you can feel the energy in the room.
He in 60s became a big time user of 120, and started using low angles, which were incredible compositions like this one. For a photojournalist to work with 120 is very difficult, and he created some great images like this of Nehru with Jacqueline Kennedy. He traveled, he sold pictures all over the world. After the independence, there wasn't much left to do politically. He started creating stories. He started doing pilgrimages and going to places and creating. He used to write his own stories. So these are some of his images from Kashmir and various places.
Yeah, I think it was the idea of after independence also showing India to the world, and
This is a very ancient form of irrigation, which we have seen, which we have grown up seeing this. This is how the water was drawn from the well in the field. So I was able to locate many magazines, and some I found in his collection where he would sell his pictures on India. And these are, mind you, again, all hand painted. You can see the acknowledgement, Kulwant Roy. And I know they're hand painted because I have the black and white negatives of these. Again, with acknowledgement, Amarnath pilgrimage. This is sometime in 1957.
you can see his documentarian style to his travel imagery. It's almost.
So he actually perfected himself. He was a self-taught photographer. He learned the basics from my great grand uncles, but he just moved on his own and created and learned on his own. I mean, I'm sure. I mean, what would he have seen? There were no magazines, there were no libraries. Where could he go and learn? I used to wonder, what did he do? Who inspired this gentleman? Look at this classic image of Bhakra Nangal Dam. It is so powerful. This is a 120 negative. You see the figures, you see the power. Those are the sluice gates of the Bhakra Nangal Dam. You see the half frame of the cyclist just exiting the frame, and you see these two characters. So 1958, one day, he left on a world tour and he wrote letters every day to hundreds of his friends. He visited some 40 odd countries. And when I started working on his archive, hundreds of people wrote to me, oh, my father was a friend of his and he used to write to him, I can send you his postcards. And I have a huge collection. This itself is a very interesting archive and a collection of what he saw. And these are hundreds of postcards which he wrote to people and friends all over the country, telling them, hey, this is what our country needs to do. This is what our children need to do. This is what I'm seeing here. These are amazing stories. And he shot thousands and thousands of rolls of film. And the tragedy struck in 62 or 61 end. From Japan, he sailed for India and he shipped all his works, and everything was stolen by the time it arrived in India. And he kept looking in the dumps of Delhi for decades. I remember in 60s, he would come home sometime and said, oh, he spent whole day in Kabadi Bazaar asking people if so-and-so things had, he used to advertise in newspapers saying, anybody who finds this, I'll be able, I'll give a reward. I'll actually honor that man, but nothing was ever found. He was totally shattered and broken when his entire lifetime's work of traveling for 3 years, 40 countries, everything was stolen. That's him in New York. So in 2008, New York Times actually found out about my archive and they carried a half-page story how these images have been found. And subsequently many newspapers got in touch with me and it became a very important archive. Brunch carried an 8-page story on my archive, how I found this archive and who this man was. I eventually published a book, History in the Making, Visual Archives of Kulwant Roy.
This is a book that's currently available on Amazon for anybody listening who's interested. It's an incredible archive and definitely worth having in your bookshelf.
My advertising work came to grinding halt, and I spent 3 years either exhibiting his work or digitizing it.
And I use this moment to ask everyone on the Zoom, to if you have any questions or even if you're listening via Facebook or YouTube, please do share them on whatever platform that you are. We will be taking questions from everyone towards the end of the discussion.
Sure. And amazing, sometime he documented his friends. He never married, never had a family. He was totally involved with photojournalism, wedded to his camera, and that's Humay and some really well-known photographers of 50s and 60s. Again, but this is amazing. This is from 1947. Around the time we got in all these photographers, and look at their cameras. They're standing with General Cariappa. Eventually, this collection became a national collection, and it's been to all the three national galleries of modern art, and it's traveled to 9 countries. Uh, but of late, I've been that's his stamp. 3819 was his office and residence where I used to go and work. It was called Delhi 6 3819 Mori Gate. That's an inauguration of his show. So in every show, I actually showed his images as well his equipment, the kind of equipment which he used to take the pictures. Kushwant Singh wrote a lot about my work and said it's one of the most interesting works for any uh, student of history, because I keep saying students of history should actually read this book and see these characters. Otherwise, these names will become roads and roundabouts in our country. You'll know all these names as Kamla Nagar or MG Road, or, if you ask somebody, ki ye, what is this Bhula Desai Road? They'll say, we don't know. We know it. Are Bhula Desai, who was he? So, Bhula Bhai this. So it's like these characters, there's a lot more history to them. Otherwise, all our students will only know them as names of roads and roundabouts.
So maybe this is a good time, Aditya, because it's already 6, and maybe we segue into how this archive was, I guess, the start for you of this journey of digging more into the technology of photography in the early days of photography.
And so this book, please, and I'll quickly rush through this, how the exhibitions evolved, and one exhibition led to another exhibition. And for a few years, I was just traveling with these exhibitions to various places. Like this exhibition was held in the metro, Delhi Metro. It evolved into a Gandhi collection, which was presented to Obama. This is his Leica. And now what happened was very interesting is I started looking at my collection of cameras seriously, and also other archives which have been egg albumin prints from 1860s, and 3D viewers and stereoscopes. So I started looking, and like this People of India. This is from, I have a slightly decent collection of maybe 200 prints, egg albumin prints of People of India from 1870, which was published under the patronage of Lord Canning. So here, this is how Kodak launched their cameras. You press the button, we do the rest. And I started looking at the family albums and established India Photo Archive Foundation. So now I'll finish here and talk about the making of my museum.
The dream project.
Can I take 1 minute break?
Sure. So for everyone listening, like I said, please take a minute. We're just, Aditya just catching his breath. If you have any questions, please drop them. There's a Q&A box in Zoom. If you're listening on Facebook, please just drop a comment and we'll try to respond to it, on screen in conversation with Aditya. We also have a small poll that's running on Zoom. If you can take a minute to just quickly respond to that, it would be useful for us to know for our future programming. And while we wait for Aditya to return, I wanted to also just quickly plug that, the month of August has been a very busy month for our foundation, Chennai Photo Biennale Foundation. We've been programming and curating in very interesting content about photography. So we now have 3 Facebook and social media presences. There is the CPB, or the Chennai Photo Biennale Foundation. We also have CPB Prism, which is focused on young audiences and early stage learners in photography. And we have the CPB Learning Lab, who's the host for today's event, um, which is more for photographers who are learning beginning parts of photography, professional photographers, even young artistic practitioners who want to get more deeper into photography. And of course, early stage critical thinking on photography. So do follow these profiles of ours. We've been curating almost every day great content about photo archives, museums, collections, libraries, uh, and we've been publishing them on our social media. This is a great way for us to let our audience, which is you, know what's happening in the world of photography in India. Often we only find out what Google tells us, and it's great that my team and Shuchi and her colleagues and Gayatri and her team is going out there and bringing you some of interesting content from around the country. Over back to you, Aditya.
Yes. So
So Aditya, I'm sorry to rush you, but it's 6:10, so we'll go through like maybe 10, 15 minutes of the presentation, and we'd love to see the museum live walkthrough.
I'm getting the presentation.
Sure, sure.
Some issues with the. Can you see me?
Yes, we can see you, but not your screen as yet.
Oh, the screen share is not happening?
I think you just turned it off when.
Is the screen share on?
Now it is, yes.
Okay. So I'll quickly go through this, and this is how the museum was made. And this is the building which was given to me. It was a badminton court, and I sat and actually designed the building with the help of some friends. And
So Aditya, why? I'd love to start with, I know that in your basement of your home, you had a collection of cameras that was growing and more people were giving you cameras. But why? Why did you think? And what is the root?
So Varun is kind of, while I was studying the archive, one thing which I realized was very few people knew about the technology which went into making of the pictures, and especially the people who were writing on photography, people who were commenting on photography. I started with them. They said, oh, we don't know how these images were taken. And so forget the students, even the people who were actually supposed to be authorities on photography had very little knowledge about history of photography. So I said, okay, let me create a place. And I was lucky. The Municipal Corporation of Gurgaon actually saw my collection, and they said, we'll be happy. And I actually drove this project. I sat here for 1.5 years with the government contractors, supervised, because there were no engineers, there were no architects. It was me, my imagination, and some friends who would help me on the phone. And they say, okay, this is how it has to be done. And I used to convince the government officials and the contractors that this is what I am looking at. And this is how this badminton court was actually converted into the museum. It was day and night. It took me 15 months to complete this project. And I documented every day. Many times friends used to visit me. I used to tell them, ki, please come to the construction site. I'll show you what I'm trying to do. And this is how the museum evolved. Only even today, I am one of the few guys who knows exactly where the conduits are running, where the pipes are running, how the structure is balanced, because people came, they did their job and they left. But I'm the only continuous factor in this. I studied a lot of manuals on museum. See, there's no place in India where I could go and say, hey, can you make a museum? Can you make a building? They would ask me, what are you trying to do? How big is your building? I said, 18,000 square feet. When are you going to make it? I said, I've started. I want to finish it in the next 10 months. Are you crazy? Don't even talk to us. So I said, wait, I can, I know how to figure it out. So I picked up a lot of these. Invested very heavily in the books. I bought books on museums and how museums were made. And I even went to the factory which in UP, which was making the iron girders and beams, because I wanted to be very sure of the quality which was going into them. They thought I was crazy that I've actually driven down to this godforsaken place to check the quality of the beams. So I finished the groundwork, which was we had to actually excavate the entire building, and then these things were brought, and the structure was slowly erected inside the building. And this is what it looks like today. This is to give you an idea of how all this evolved into the museum.
So, Aditya, when did you start collecting cameras? When I understand you said that it was the archive that excited you to look into the technology.
The collection of the camera is very interesting, which I thought I was going to talk to you when I was doing the museum talk, but I'll tell you. So this is, and I'll talk to you later. So when it came to construction of shelves, I found, hey, there's no place you can actually buy a shelf, ready-made shelves. You have to, now we didn't have the kind of money to import them from China or Europe. So what we did was I evolved my own system with the help of some friends from NID, and we created wooden shelves. Lighting, I said I refused to hire any lighting consultant. I said photographers are the best experts when it comes to lighting. So I would actually play around with my lighting. I said, this is where the shelf is. This is how the light is going to be on the camera. This is where the shadows are going to be. And this is what the museum looks like today, by the way. Many of you see, that's a shelf with my carpenter. That's a prototype of the shelf.
I've been visiting a few times through this process, and I've watched you deal with all these carpenters and the madness that's going on, and you have incredible patience.
I wanted to finish this museum in 9 months, but it took me 15. So how did we do this whole museum business? We actually created prototypes in my office. So while I was at the site, two very enthusiastic interns, I used to give them instructions. Place your cameras like this. This is how the information is going to come. This is where the light is going to be. So for each shelf, a prototype was made, and we experimented. And I would actually come back in the evening and go through, okay, these shelves, and this is how they will transform into how were the flooring selected. That's my dear friend Gopika Chawla. She helped me with the graphics, very important. She gave me I knew what I wanted, but she actually gave me the final graphics. And like, this is the timeline. This is the prototype of, we made dozens of, I set up a printing unit here, and I used to print everything on rough paper, put it up and check how is it going to look. This is what the museum looks like today, but this is what the shelves transformed into. This is what the timeline transformed into. So if you see, this is a sample. So actually what we have done is we've set standards in museum making today. Looking for colors and looking for what should be there. You see that prototype wall. You see this. Now you see this. Shelves. We used to actually place things on these huge cases and check whether they'll be able to take the weight. And how was this museum made? The government gave me the land. Government put in almost 8-9 crores in the building. I had to do the entire interior through crowdfunding, and you will also see CPB somewhere. So friends from all over donated and continue to donate. Now we have a problem. We have to run the museum. So this is what we've done. We've created a wall inside the museum, which is the people who have actually supported us. And these are some of those images of what our atrium looks like. So can you imagine, this is the same badminton court. These
I
are
really recommend, if you're in Delhi or Gurgaon, that you take the time to visit the museum. Not only that it's definitely worth visiting, but the museum needs our support, especially now with COVID having come just months or days after Aditya had finally opened the museum formally early this year. So I think it's very important that we go, and not just go once, but frequent, engage with the space. And they have a lovely cafe with a great restaurant. So that's one more reason to go.
So as you enter, the most important thing for me is the people who made the museum with me. I dedicated a wall to the people. Right at the entrance is the people who I worked with, all the laborers, all the contractors. I said, okay, instead of any dignitaries or anybody else, I'm going to have images of these people. And these people are the people who worked with me on this museum. We have one of the best cafes in town, so please come here. And this is also, I've tried to address the issue of sustainability of places. So cafes, talk areas and exhibitions. We have a fantastic, we have fun studios like this where people come. There's Dinesh, me and Latika. We have another period studio. These are the curators from the Boston Art Museum who landed up one day unannounced, and they said they'd never seen a place like this in the world, and they left some fabulous comments. These are the trustees and the curators of Boston Art Museum. So that's the making of the museum. Now I'm going to be shifting to museum walk, and just take a second to
Sure.
turn to my.
So while you're doing that, there are a couple of questions. Maybe I could quickly prompt you. Are they sort of from Priyanjali? Do you have any suggestions for preserving, like for people who have archives that they've discovered from their family, or that someone's gifted to them, or you've inherited something? You mentioned that you lost 25 years by letting the archive sit. If tomorrow someone finds an archive within their family, what should be the first thing you do, or where do you start?
So there are two things. First is physical preservation, and the next is how do you actually digitize them. So I have addressed both these issues, and first was the preservation. 1 second, please. I'm just going.
Take your time. Just for everyone else to know, Aditya is just switching to another device so that he can walk us through the Museo Camera. Tejas, if you're listening, maybe you can disable Aditya's screen sharing or whoever's playing host for this. Thank you.
Yeah, that was.
So, as part of the special treat for World Photography Day, I'm very happy that Aditya has agreed to give us a virtual walkthrough of what it would feel like if you were to visit Camera Museum in person. It's really wonderful because I know
Increase the volume of this. Yeah.
we have audiences from all over the country and the world, in fact. So this is your ringside seat to Camera, Museo Camera. It's indeed a special treat to be here. Perfect.
So I am going to be. So the story of photography actually starts from.
Aditya, I can see the device, so I can see your gimbal's stand. It's covering.
One second.
Just for everyone who's listening while Aditya is getting his gimbal back up and running, please do check out the Museo Camera website. They currently have an advance sale for their tickets for 1 year. So you can purchase a ticket that is valid for up to 1 year, and you're able to go anytime. This is a great way to show support.
Yes.
That would be a wonderful way to contribute to Museo Camera. All you, Aditya. We're seeing you.
So can you see me now?
You can, Aditya, but it's vertical. So the aspect ratio is off. It's showing us a vertical video frame. You need to flip your camera left. Maybe I think from what I know of my gimbal, yeah. Okay, perfect. That works.
Yes. So this is our camera obscura room, and this is how the story of photography started. And so we have a camera obscura here, actually, which a lot of visitors play around with, and this is how the images were created. And we have some of the most famous images like Girl with a Pearl, created by John Vermeer, which was actually drawn on camera obscura. So camera obscura was nothing but a copying device, and which was, so we have actually a device here which is used, and then you walk into, you see the wall of inventors. So Joseph Nicephore Niepce, who created the world's first image, and this is the image in 1827. And then Louis Daguerre, who created the world's first perfect images. Herschel, who gave the word photography to photography, and also created cyanotypes, and he also discovered hypo. So, and Talbot, who helped in creation of the world's first negative. So this is the wall which I was showing you. It starts from 1827. So here we have all the important processes like 1851, collodion wet plate gets discovered. 1854, the Photographic Society of Mumbai is launched, Bombay. 1840, Calcutta Asiatic Society exhibits daguerreotypes. So this wall actually displays all the important events in the history of photography, art, and technology, like 1834 to 1912, which was the time for Samuel Byrne. And in 1863 to 1872, he was here in India. He set up, Charles Shepherd founded India's oldest studio, Bourne and Shepherd. 1868, People of India, 8-volume set. So this wall connects the history of art and photography and also major artists. So 1916, the Dadaism. So, you try and give it a larger picture. Dorothea Lange, 1936. Robert Capa, 1930. Kulwant Roy, 1920. Surrealism. In 1972, Minox camera, which was used to document the Watergate. So we stop here. 2010, Instagram is launched, and because there is no end to this. And we come back to the idea of camera. But let me just go back. I missed out on one very important shelf, which actually displays an original daguerreotype camera and daguerreotype images. So I've tried to connect the art of photography with the evolution of technology, especially it's important for people who write and who want to understand photography from that point of view. And here is this display of all the processes, all the important processes like daguerreotype, ambrotype, anthotype, and how they evolved. So it's very important to understand, before Daguerre announced photography to the world on 19th August, that's today, in 1839, what was photography known as? Here it is. It was known as likeness, and it was sold and advertised as, come get your likeness done. Here is an original ad from that time. So it says, splendid daguerreotype miniatures taken in every style, and who would respectfully inform the inhabitants of dash dash that he has taken rooms in so and so place, is now prepared to take likeness of all who may favor him with a call. His miniatures are warranted not to be surpassed by any for their richness of tone and lifelike appearances. So this is how it was actually Daguerre who went to register his patent when the French government said, hey, this is fantastic. It's a gift to the mankind, and they paid him off. So that is why today we celebrate the World Photography Day. But also very important, interesting thing is, the day he actually captured his first image, his statement, I have seized the light, I have captured its flight. So we carry on with our story of the cameras, and here Thornton Packard, a very important company from 1888, which made some absolutely fantastic wooden cameras. We come to Kodak. So while the French invented photography, English refined it. Talbot created the negative. It was the Americans, it was who marketed it to the world and who made more money than anybody else, as usual. Eastman, George Eastman, who was a bank clerk, actually launched his cameras. And this is a cartridge Kodak from 1897, a folding pocket. So what was beautiful about these cameras is they were portable, they could be carried. This is one of the world's earliest panoramic camera from 1899, panorama camera, where the lens actually travels from left to right. Very interesting, when he went to British Patent Office, they asked him, what is Kodak? He said, Kodak is not a foreign name or word. It was constructed by me to serve a definite purpose. It has the following merits as a trademark word. It is short. It is not capable of mispronunciation. Third, it does not resemble anything in the art and cannot be associated with anything in the art except the Kodak. So we have ads, we have patents from 1880s, which trace the journey of this brand Kodak. But it's very strange. In 1932, he had achieved everything in life. He became the world's richest man. He actually committed suicide on 15th March 1932. He wrote a note to his friends, and he called his 3-4 friends to his house and said, to my friends, my work is done, why wait? And he shot himself dead. So this is a very interesting story, how Kodak girl was used to sell the idea of photography. Here, you see some fantastic posters which were created. Grafflex, another iconic camera, one of the most important cameras for photojournalists, studio photographers. This was a subsidiary of Kodak. Actually, it was started by Farmer and Swink Manufacturing Company in 1887, but Eastman used to typically acquire all these companies.
And so all these cameras are working cameras, functioning, right, Aditya?
I would say 75% of them work, but because of some spring or light leak, and they're old, I wouldn't like to really push them beyond a certain point. It's like forcing an old ambassador or a Fiat and say, I want to drive this. No, but I do have some working models for some of these cameras, which I intend to start working with. Zeiss, another very iconic camera company.
You can
So
see,
we go back to,
you can see the cameras becoming smaller.
yeah, now this is Century Graphic, one of the most iconic and important camera for the studio photographers. It's called Century Graphic because it was invented in 1899, turn of the century. And it was huge. And believe me, some of these cameras were used in India and are still, they were used till 1970s in Mumbai. And they shot on glass plates.
Yeah. That one looks in beautiful condition, ready to shoot.
Yes, ready to shoot. Here is our period studio, which I showed you about. This is how these were called daylight studios. Why they were called daylight studios? Because um, most of the photography was done using daylight. The lights were not strong enough, and so they had these white curtains which could be moved around to control the amount of light required for photography. And this is the kind of equipment which was used in these daylight studios.
Yeah, also a lot of these processes were UV sensitive, so you needed that.
Daylight, absolutely. So, for a long time, the glass plates were only UV sensitive. A very classic collection, again, which I talked about, People of India. We are displaying some original prints from 1870 here. These are from my archive again of People of India. These are original egg albumin prints. So the museum kept evolving. I kept thinking every day, okay, how am I going to display this? Now, apertures. This is the story of apertures. Apertures were invented by John Waterhouse, and they were called Waterhouse tops. And this is what the apertures look like. They were typically inserted in the lens barrel to control the amount of light required. Shutters. So most of these early cameras didn't have really a shutter. Even this Century Graphic doesn't have a shutter. All that it has is a cap. A cap was used because the exposures were typically half a minute, 2 minutes, or 15 seconds, 20 seconds. Uh, Magic lanterns, which were used, which are like projectors. So here I've tried to, so they used oil lamps. There was no electricity. So actually I've tried to create an effect of a oil lamp. You can see a light flickering inside this.
Yeah.
And we have images which are being projected. And we have some modern 35 projectors with these slides.
Okay.
I think light meters. This is some of these light meters are from 1880s, and some of the latest ones are also here. The Seconic is here, but some of these gadgets are from 1880s, 1890s. Flash, which was actually this is world's first flash, that T, where they actually used magnesium powder, which was ignited to illuminate.
Yeah. Extremely dangerous and explosive process.
Absolutely. I mean, it killed many photographers and the subjects also. TLRs. I mean, the whole story of TLR is so interesting. I keep studying the negatives of photographers, how they worked with TLR, as you've seen in the case of Kulwant Roy, how intelligently he composed with TLRs.
Sorry, we've lost you, Aditya. The video now. Back.
Am I back?
Yeah, you're back.
Yeah. Twin lens reflex. ECFA, and the most iconic ECFA Click 3, which many of us will remember from 1970s and 60s, the most expensive camera ever made in India. 300 rupees it used to cost. Nothing but a plastic body with a plastic lens, but it was such a big price position, you know, I can't tell you. Zeiss icons. So this is the first part of the museum. I'm drifting into the next part. We have a wall here with all the Zeiss lenses and how the lenses are made. So we have cross sections of lenses to explain to people, hey, this is what goes into the making of the lens. And unique and rare cameras like this camera, which could create 15 images in one go. I mean, you know, those small visa size images, but please to note, this is from 1907. Raja, one of the most important camera ever made in India. This is a handcrafted copy of Deardorff. Voigtlanders, the story of Voigtlanders, horsemen. Now we come to a very interesting part, which is everybody today knows Lightroom. Very few people know the actual dark room.
We lost your video, Aditya.
Oh, 1 second. Am I back?
Not yet, the video. I can hear you. I can't see video yet.
1 second, 1 second. See the back.
Yeah, you're back.
Sorry.
No problem.
Yeah, certain areas in the museum have little low signal strength.
Yeah.
So here, this is amazing because today's generation has very scant idea about how images were created. You know, you are setting up a dark room right now.
Yeah.
And so I worked in Kulwant Roy's dark room and I created images. And so we actually have enlargers with the images on the easel. And these are typically triggered by lights. You know, whenever somebody walks in, they switch on. Very interesting Russian cameras like Fed and press camera, which was used to create the printing plates from early century till 1980s. Printing plates were created using this giant camera. This is only part of it. I mean, rest of it is, you know, the wheels and things we had to remove. So
this is my favorite section. So tell us.
K-20, which was used in the World War to document the infamous Hiroshima and Nagasaki atom bomb attack. And so these cameras were actually manufactured to shoot from aircrafts. And you'll be surprised, each camera has a tag which says property of US Air Force. And how I found them is also very interesting. You will be surprised to know that only 15,000 of these cameras were ever made. And I found 13 of them in India. The training for aerial photography was actually imparted in Kharagpur in India, which was where American troops were based during the World War II. And I suppose these were disposed of after the World War. Very interesting spy cameras from early century. Some of them go back to 1907, 1901. Minox, which I told you was used to actually document the
Watergate. Yeah.
Watergate. Leicas, we have a very interesting collection of real Leicas and couple of fake Leicas, which were also very popular and made in large quantities in Germany and in Russia. These are very interesting stereo cameras. The concept of stereo photography goes back to 1850s, 1880s, when they discovered actually the human eye sees two different images which are juxtaposed in the brain, and that's how you see the depth. And that depth is actually stereo. So we have some of these cameras really going back to early century. Canon. So it'll be very interesting. The original logo of Canon in 1933, the company used the name Kwanon, meaning the Buddhist goddess of mercy, which was the logo that evolved in Canon. So it was Kwanon.
That's interesting.
My favorite camera and my workhorse, Sinar.
Yeah.
The ultimate camera ever manufactured. You worked with Sinar.
Yes.
Have you?
Yes, of course.
And
I mean, great technical photography and technical camera.
yes. I have these original images here. Polaroid and the story of Polaroid, how Edwin Land, the inventor, was actually requested, and his daughter said, "Why can't I see images immediately?" So he actually, within 3 years, created Polaroid, which is, the idea was instant photography.
Right. So Aditya, I just wanted to reference that, while you were going through the dark room, that Museo Camera does have its own dark room, which is a working dark room where you teach analog processes, right?
Absolutely. We have everything here, paper and chemicals and films available. And going back to our selfie studio, this is our selfie studio, which is quite popular with people. This is a small shop in the museum where we sell various things, and most importantly,
Nice.
film. We have a proper refrigerator where we keep all kinds of films which are available, T-Max and Ilford and paper. So this is a short trip of the museum to give you an idea. And uh, you
This is the main lobby.
the main atrium, and the wall of honor of all the people who contributed to the making of the museum and helped me with the idea. I mean, it's this was I had the content, but I didn't have the money to create this. So So we are back in the first gallery, which
Before we
is...
close, I just wanted to maybe talk a little bit about what other because we've seen the beautiful space of Museum Camera, but it's also a very active space that you do a lot of workshops and different kinds of educational activities. If you can tell us a little bit about how how the museum is engaging with the audiences, and also what you see is in the near future for the museum, what's coming up.
So my idea of creating this museum was to connect the art of photography with the technology of photography, to give a sense of history to people, to bring out the historicity of photography, because I would like people to understand there is a lot more to seeing and capturing images. So we conduct workshops, we keep inviting professionals, we do darkroom training sessions, we do historical processes like egg albumin print and salt prints and cyanotype prints. And because, for me, analog is very important. There is a sense of, uh, it's it brings out the seriousness of image making, because it's not, that you don't have a 32 GB card and you can keep on shooting. You create one image, you pre-visualize, and you say, hey, this is it. And this is how these photographers worked. They could never, there was no second chance. There was no second opportunity. There was one opportunity to create the image.
Right.
And it brought out the best in them. I mean, look at Kulwant Roy's work. I mean, those images created with sheet film, I compare them with what Dorothea Lange's work, or people from farm administration, and how they created work with endless rolls of film, with endless supply of sheet film. They would shoot 200 exposures. They would take endless images and then select one. But here is one man who could not afford anything more than 10 images on a particular trip. So for him, it was so important to get each and every image in the best possible way. So, it's Museo Camera is open to all kind of engagements. We've been hosting talks, we've been hosting art events. We're not, I say multimedia is welcome. Anybody who wants to dabble in any, who would like to have a place to work here, we are willing to do that.
Thank you so much, Aditya. It's been a really wonderful. I mean, you've in some part answered some of the questions that were there. One of the questions was sort of, what is your opinion of this current, trend in photography where everybody is now a photographer with Instagram, and you get likes and you feel like you're a great photographer. For someone who's looking at photography, not just from today, but from this historical perspective, what is your position on what you see is happening to photography? It's evolution or de-evolution. What do you feel about that?
So my take is very. I come from the background of, I believe in the slowness of photography, where we guys created images. We created the image in our mind first, and then actually shot that image. We did not shoot 500 images and then pressed one button. So today's photography rests on one button, which is delete. I mean, everybody is obsessed with, okay, let me just shoot this. Then you're deleting 500 images and say, okay, this is closest to what I want, and now I will work on this. Fine. You don't apply your brain. You don't think twice before pressing the trigger. So, it's, I, I don't, I have nothing against people who, against digital. I'm a great fan of digital. It has democratized photography. It has made it uh, so popular and reachable today. Um, I I communicate with my entire housekeeping team also through images. I tell them, okay, I've given some of them camera phones, and they shoot images, and some of them I tell them, अरे यार उसको थोड़ा सा ठीक से लिया करो ना, थोड़ा सा इधर से जाके लो. Because what am I doing? Actually, I'm teaching them the art of documentation. They're just sending me images and said, sir, ye dekhiye, is this okay? So I said, no, you need to go back and shoot. So, photography has many roles to play, and
Right.
documentation is one very important role to play.
No, absolutely. And I think just to add to that, and the point you were making earlier is that often the current trend is that it's rapid fire, and that just makes you a lazier photographer. And that's why I shoot film personally, is because it gives you the ability to slow down and concentrate on what's in the frame, and you have to trust in the chemical process, and that's something, it creates a sense of discipline sometimes.
So, there's another thing about me is I love the physicality of photography, which is the analog. Analog has so much of physicality, the touch and feel, which I miss in the digital. You can't touch pixels, but you can touch your 4x5 film.
Right,
And
right.
you process it. You play around with chemicals, and I love the physicality of the whole engagement with photography.
So Aditya, we are already at 7. The last question for you is actually, I just got a message from a friend saying they love your initiative and how can they support? What are the ways in which people can support Museo Camera?
So right now I have we were hit very badly. I mean, we've been hit very badly because of this pandemic. We've been shut for last 5 months, and to kickstart, we had no money to hire our workers back, because after paying them for a few months and with no source of revenue, we said, okay, let's launch a scheme by which let's get people to buy tickets at 500 rupees for two, which they can use anytime over next 1 year. You can gift it to your friend. You can just give us 500 rupees, buy two tickets. That'll help us through. I mean, we must sell a few thousand tickets every month to actually be able to sustain ourselves in this process. So, that's my.
Gandhi folio that you're selling, which is a collectible piece that I've seen.
So we have collectible images of Kulwant Roy's collection printed on archival paper, which are limited number, open editions also. And another thing, I mean, I find people find it very simple. Let's just buy two tickets and give them to some friends in Gurgaon or Delhi, or we'll come next year. But
Yeah.
that's a nice way of supporting a museum right now.
Done. So everybody listening, please do go over to Museo Camera's website and pick up your tickets for yourself or any friends or family. I know I'm going to do that right now. Thank you so much, Aditya, for your time.
Thank you very much for organizing this wonderful, and I mean, CPB team is doing fantastic work. As I keep saying to people, carry on with your initiatives, and I'm happy to partner with you guys in anything.
Looking forward to seeing you when I'm next in Delhi and hopefully spend some time together.
Okay, and
thanks, Aditya.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, everyone, for listening.
Yeah.